Hey guys, welcome to Tennis 360, the newest podcast from QualityShot Tennis. My name's Anthony Hirsch.
And I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And we're going to be covering all things tennis, from like tennis culture, upcoming tournaments. We're going to be covering Cincinnati and the Cincinnati final that just happened. Excited to get this started. Do you want to get into then the Cincinnati final and the final between Alcaraz and Djokovic that just happened? That was just totally crazy and just like blew all of our minds.
Absolutely. I feel like there's no other place to start than with that match, really.
Yeah.
Contender for best 3-set match ever. Obviously, we have recency bias, but I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was just so utterly exciting. I mean, everybody was waiting for like a year to like almost a year and a half for like the next Alcaraz Djokovic match. We just weren't getting it. And then we got this like absolute insane match, which was just totally crazy. And yeah, like the twists and turns of it really made it so utterly just, I don't know, you couldn't turn away from the screen for 4 hours.
Yeah, and to kind of have this now like 3 almost back-to-back matches in the latest tournaments that they've played each other, the French, obviously Wimbledon, and then and here as well. I think it's kind of setting up quite a historical end of the year final. And so what can we really digest and learn from this one that might help us understand or predict what we might see in the next few weeks at the US Open?
Yeah, it's hard to know what to take away from it. I mean, Alcaraz lost in the quarterfinals of Cincinnati last year, and then he went on to win the tournament in like the most stunning, crazy fashion, beating Cilic in 5 sets, then beating Sinner in 5 sets in a match point, and then beating out in the semifinals as well Francis Tiafoe, the American, and then of course Casper Ruud in the final. Yes. But it was like that. But before the US Open, people were like, oh, well, Alcaraz isn't really looking like in the best form to take this title, then kind of ran away with it. So it's hard to know from Cincinnati, but who do you think Djokovic is the favorite going into New York? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's so tough also because we haven't seen Djokovic at the US Open the last few years because of the pandemic and kind of everything going on. You know, it is historically one of his best tournaments. I mean, he seems to always play well at the US Open, but at the same time, we've not seen peak Alcaraz compete with peak Djokovic on a hard court quite yet. So I think it's really hard to get a good sense of what this might look like. I think there might be some challenges that could face them in the draws that would set them up at a kind of different comfort level for, you know, if they were to meet in the final. And so particularly this week, watching Cincinnati, Alcaraz did go deep a number of times. He did have some trickier opponents. Djokovic did seem to breeze through. And so when it came down to this almost like longevity battle and, you know, as you said, nearly a 4-hour 3-set match, and it finishing with Alcaraz cramping in his hands, one just sort of thinks, you know, what happens in the earlier rounds here is, I think, really going to be a big determining factor with anything that might line up in the final of the US Open.
Yeah, for sure. Draw. I think the draw is a big thing for the tournament. Yeah, it's like you want to know who each player is playing, because at this point it feels like playing Jannik Sinner is at the US Open seems like a much tougher task than playing Stefanos Tsitsipas, even though they're one ranking spot away in the ranking. So
absolutely. Yeah. What did you think? I've noticed over the last in both Toronto and Cincinnati that it seemed like at times Alcaraz was struggling to close out matches in a way that I honestly didn't kind of recognize him from before. Like he just had a couple of these wobbles, like against Hurkacz in Toronto, where you just sort of thought like, geez, you had it, and he normally is so good at like finishing it off, and it just seems like he's lost his focus a few times. And in particular in this final, obviously it looked like towards the end of that first set with Djokovic struggling with heat stroke and you know, down a break in the second, that Alcaraz just kind of took his eye off the ball. And as I said, that felt very uncharacteristic to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a stat for you. He played 7 straight 3-setters to finish off Cincinnati. It was like he beat Ben Shelton in straight sets to start off Canada. Then since then, it's been only tough matches for him. Yeah, I think there's something for sure about Carlos struggling in to finish off the matches. I mean, we saw him have a match point against Tommy Paul in the second set of their match in Cincinnati, and he didn't put away, and then Tommy Paul won 11 straight points and just ran away with it into the third set, which I was like, that's unbelievable. So I think that was very strange to watch, and then we saw Djokovic in the final, and even against Zverev in the semis, was up 5-4 serving for the match against Zverev, and then wasn't able to finish off, and then he wasn't able to finish off with 4 championship points against Alcaraz, and a lot of it you can chalk up to Alcaraz being the really clutch player that he's shown to be. That's really amazed everybody, but it's also just I don't know. There were a few surprising performances in that way this week, despite the incredible final that we saw. There was definitely a bit of that where it was like a bit surprising. Like, we're used to seeing these guys finish, and Alcaraz was struggling again and again. And I don't know. It could also be that he didn't do well in these tournaments last year. Going into Madrid this year, he was very clutch in matches because he had already won last year. That could be a confidence thing. So I think part of it could be that. And I think maybe going into next year, he's already gone to the final here. He'll learn from this experience. And I think he'll be more clutch in the future now that he's had success and finished off in those matches.
Yeah. And in particular with Djokovic, one always knows that the door is never fully shut with him, and he is the last of all competitors you want to let back in. And I just thought he was missing that composure and concentration or focus to be able to get it over the line in that second set. He set it up well for himself, and he was in the right position to do so. And just the unforced errors started creeping in a way that, it's just very inconsistent. So I think for him, the biggest learning point has got to be, closing it out when you have the opportunity to do so, especially when you're playing a cat like Djokovic. It's just a recipe for disaster, and you'd hate to see something like that happen in a 5-set match as well, where then he's got to buckle down for several more hours. And if that's the case, I back Djokovic from a physicality perspective most of the time.
Yeah, that's true for sure. Novak was suffering from heat stroke, and it seemed like that second set was really Alcaraz's to take, and then to take the match. But he really, it really completely ran away from Alcaraz. He played a poor game at I think it was 4-3 serving for it, and then he played 3 bad errors where he wasn't even under a lot of pressure, and then he kind of lost it from there. And Novak started playing more aggressive, started dictating with the heat as well, which really led to a lot of faster conditions and faster courts, and it really made the ball skid through faster. Even Novak was talking about the higher bounces being really hard to deal with from the Carlos forehand, and the fact that Novak started to dictate and be more aggressive really helped him out. And he was starting to make more serves in, and all across the board, he was just really starting to play a game that can hurt Alcaraz, which is why Novak won and leveled up the head-to-head 2-2. But yeah, he came back, which was very, very out of nowhere when everybody thought he was about to pass out from heat stroke, and like he was done. But
from a strategic perspective, I thought that was definitely an interesting shift where Djokovic was realizing he didn't want to be in these super long physical rallies and points, and he was, really turning his game into attack, which is such an impressive thing to kind of see happen in real time. And Djokovic is the last person I would associate with a serve and volley type of strategy, but he was doing it and he was executing on it. Again, like uncharacteristic or things we don't typically recognize in his game. So credit to him for being able to problem solve mid-match and kind of figure out what his body needed, which was shorter points, and execute on that really well. I was curious if you saw some of the Twitter commentary around a possible let on match point. Did you see that?
I saw a little bit of that. Yeah, Renee Stubbs, I think, tweeted out about it.
Yeah, what do you think? Did you notice anything? Like, why wasn't it discussed?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it should have been. I didn't notice anything. It's obviously impossible to tell from without a replay on it, but it seemed like what they were saying, Alcaraz did have a strange reaction after the return, so that's what people were talking about. But yeah, I guess it's just there's no real way to know. I've heard that being said before. It was actually the Australian Open last year where Nadal, people thought the Nadal serve on match point was a let, but I don't know. It's just hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
So, but it is interesting. I think that for lets, there should always be. I think that it might be a good idea for replay technology to be in place for stuff like lets and stuff. Now that there is for line calls and things, obviously that's a much more complex issue than just that. But yeah, I would need to see replays of it. I think to give my best thoughts.
I honestly didn't notice it while I was watching it again, like scrolling through Twitter post match. And then, yeah, as you say, noticing Alcaraz sort of had the two-handed gesture after match point, which, normally in a loss, you concede and you walk towards the net. So for him to sort of question it, I thought was interesting. And given the noise kind of going on in the arena, would you hear that tiny little high-pitched noise that calls the let? I mean, it's obviously on the umpire to then call it if that's the case. So ultimately one has to trust the technology, but mid-match during this final, there was an outrageously wrong electronic line call, and the umpire had to check in and see if the system was actually like calibrated and working. And so it does mean that, these things aren't 100% foolproof, and there could be a situation where, it might have been a let on match point and we didn't know it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it could have been for sure. It's definitely interesting to know. So I would ask you this: what's your kind of biggest takeaway from the final after having watched it, if there is one from that insanity that we watched?
Yeah, I mean, I think undoubtedly these are the best two players in the world right now. Their game or matchup is extremely thrilling, and naturally I think it will always be a topsy-turvy type of match, especially given the type of tennis that Alcaraz plays. I think seeing him not have some moments where he cools off in a match, that's like asking someone to be perfect from second one to the very last second, and I think that's unrealistic. So his game does ebb and flow, and I think for me the biggest takeaway there is really learning to be intense and intentional in the moments when you have opportunities to close it out. I don't foresee him making those types of mistakes again. But, it goes back to what we were talking about of like, I thought that was uncharacteristic for him in the first place the last 2 weeks. So, if it was a confidence thing, hopefully he comes into the US Open with confidence, knowing he is defending his title. And from a Djokovic perspective, I think the reason why I picked him to win yesterday is a little bit fresher in the legs, didn't play Toronto, gave himself a nice long rest after Wimbledon. He knows the spiel. He's been around the block before. His fitness and conditioning, even despite the heat stroke, I think is unmatched. And I think he continues to be an extreme challenge for everybody on the tour. And so for me, it's really those two who I would take away as they're a cut above the rest at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good call for sure. Yeah, people were talking about Medvedev earlier in the year, but I think Medvedev watched that match and was just sitting on the couch thinking like, man, that's crazy what they're doing out here. Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest takeaway of them all. I think I would also just add on that Novak's ridiculous mental strength, proving yet again to be probably the best, at least one of the best examples of mental strength in a player we've ever seen, possibly the best, when it really comes down to being against the wire and still being able to find a way through and get to the handshake and being on the winning side of that handshake. I think Novak's proven that he just has the guts to go for it when he's down against the wall. And even when he lost that Wimbledon final 6-4 in the fifth set, just a few weeks later now, he beats Alcaraz from down a set in the break, down match point, and finds a way through. So I think that was a big thing for Novak to win and tie it up 2-2. As close as both matches were, and the fact that both matches could go either way, they were literally points from going either way. I think the best result for tennis happened in both matches. Alcaraz figured out a way to beat the big three, beat Novak in a big major final, a tight major final, and then also Novak showing, I'm still here though, and saying I'm still around and I can beat you as well. So I think that going into the US Open, we couldn't have asked for a better lead up, even if we had written down a script. I think it really comes in quite nicely for New York.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. We couldn't have set it up better for
Yeah.
the big stage and a grand finale. So
Yeah.
exciting stuff for us fans.
Yeah. Do you want to go over just a couple of things that happened in Cincinnati as well before we go into the women's final as well?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, 0-19. Monfils 0-19 versus Novak, which is not great for Gail, especially because listen, Gail's been close against Novak before. Paris final 2009, he was third set tiebreaker, is close to winning it, and he's had a few of those, but 0-19, that's the most in ATP history. And Hubie Hurkacz with another run to the semis, but couldn't finish it off against Alcaraz, and Hurkacz had a match point before Alcaraz had a match point against Novak. Hurkacz had a match point against Alcaraz, but couldn't finish it off. So, do you think Hurkacz is gonna find his way back into the top 10?
Yes, I do.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Hardcore Hurkacz is something to be reckoned with, I think.
Nice. I like it. I think, yeah, on grass courts, he's lethal too with the serve.
Also true.
So, women's final, Coco Gauff getting it done in the final of Cincinnati. Oh, yeah. Great to see for Coco. What were your thoughts on the final, and what were your thoughts on Coco finally finding a way through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think her best match of the tournament for me was against Iga in the semis. You know, taking her world number one down first time in 8 attempts. I think that really signaled the success of her coaching change and having Brad Gilbert on her team. I mean, you know, even at Wimbledon, we were just in the lead up to Wimbledon, we were talking repeatedly about the Coco Gauff forehand weakness, and it just being something that everybody piled on, and somehow she has made an adjustment that has not, you know, turned it into a weapon per se, but it's neutralized, and she is setting herself up to kill with the backhand. Her serve is firing, and she's really shown composure in the big moments in the last few weeks. I mean, to pick up 2 titles in 3 weeks, a 500 and a Masters. I mean, it's impressive stuff. It feels like she's playing carefree tennis again, and we're really seeing that like teenage joy in her, which I think is so much fun to watch. And ultimately, in yesterday's final, I think she leaned on her athleticism as her biggest weapon against Muchova, who, you know, is a fantastic athlete herself, but Coco backs her legs, and she played a game that allowed her to do that, and executed against it in a really efficient way. I honestly don't have too many negative marks against what she did out there on court yesterday.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better either, too. I think that Gauff really, well, her best performance was against Iga, and then I think the performance I was most happy about was the final, just because her nobody, like, Muchova, she just got to the Roland Garros final, and she now is in the final of Cincinnati, and the fact that Coco was hitting the forehand so big the whole match against Muchova, and everybody was like, okay, well, this is why she's winning Cincinnati. And I don't know, it was just kind of the perfect storm and a perfect first Masters title for Coco just a few weeks after winning Washington and getting that 500 title for the first time, which, by the way, I feel bad for Zachary, who got to the final there and just still can't find a way to win any title, let alone a big one, which he keeps getting close anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? But that was it's a great win for Coco though. So I was very excited about that.
Absolutely. And, I felt like she neutralized a lot of Muchova's strengths as well. You know, Muchova usually uses her hands and her skills to slice, to kind of really trouble her opponents, especially the bigger hitters. And, you know, she had Sabalenka's number twice because of that, you know, ability to have great movement, great feel, the drop shot. And because Coco is just such a good athlete and such a good mover, I just felt like she, you know, wasn't under pressure or didn't, you know, experience that level of threat from Muchova that other players do. And then from there wasn't just playing defensive tennis, but as you say, was actually playing an attacking brand of tennis that we haven't really seen from Coco in the past. But, you know, before I felt like she was just waiting for an opportunity to hit a backhand, and now she's playing on the front foot, which is exciting to see, and, you know, is ultimately what led to the new 2 titles.
Yeah, for sure. I think, it's all about getting yourself into position, and that's really what great athleticism like Coco possesses. That's what that's going to do, is let you get into position even when you're in tougher positions, to get into a better position to hit a really effective shot. And now she's been able to do it off either side, which has been really great to see. And if she has the forehand down, she has a very complete game, I would say. I mean, do you think outside, if she gets the forehand down, then you would say that she doesn't have a gaping weakness?
Yeah, I mean, I think her being such an active player on the doubles tour means that she is confident coming to the net and being at the net, finishing off there, which I think a lot of women, especially in the top 20, tends to be more of a weakness of their game. So I think that can really play into an aggressive playing style for her. And, as you said, that athleticism, that piece, being such an excellent mover, she's up there with Iga on that front. I mean, obviously her efficiency in her movement is unmatched and unbelievable, but with the women's game kind of going that direction, I think it's not just going to be about who can power somebody off the court or finesse somebody off the court, but who has the ability to combine those factors with, a high intensity kind of rhythm and power and athleticism kind of all at the same time. And I think Coco has the weapons or the skill set to be able to do that consistently. So I think we'll see her going up in the rankings pretty quick.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah. And do you want to go over any of these other kind of just more about the tournament, or do you have more to add on the final? I mean, it was just a great win for Coco all around, and she really improved in every way that people were hoping for her to, and that unlocked a much tougher game for almost any player to face.
I mean, I think it's been an interesting Masters series from the women's tour. I think we have seen more consistency this year in terms of like top 10 players that are making deep runs. Obviously, Vondrousova being the exception to that. But to have a different name in the mix that is in the top 10, finally get a couple titles, that was fantastic to see. I think some question marks or concerns now raised over Jabeur. Sabalenka getting revenge over her, but it looked like Jabeur was moving a little bit funny, potentially a niggle injury picked up there, which is never great to see in the run-up to the US Open, where she's obviously defending a run to the final. So I have question marks over Jabeur after the last two tournaments, if I'm honest. As you say, Rybakina retirement, I think, we'll talk about it more on the podcast later, but these back-to-back Masters tournaments and then only a week off until we head into the US Open. It's a brutal schedule. They obviously also played in DC as well, and it's a quick turnaround from Wimbledon into the US hardcourt swing. A lot of tennis, a lot of late nights, and a lot of top players both on the WTA and ATP side with retirements. And, we just never want to see our best players needing to take a break because the schedule's too packed. So I think that is definitely a challenge. It was great to see Venus get a top 10 win again.
Venus is great for sure.
Yeah, against Kudermetova. That was she just played a great match and so much self-belief and just, ability to kind of dig deep. And she's such a fighter. She's an inspiration still to everyone on the tour.
She beat Georgie like a couple months ago on the grass and then nearly beat Ostapenko. But I mean, this is a step up. Kudermetova was in the top 10 earlier this year. So it's a good one for Venus.
Always has the ability to cause problems. It's whether she can do it back to back. That's really the question. But, I think just the fact that I think, she's 43 or older now. And she's just like, I don't know how.
Any critiques, I think you can leave them at the door for Venus. She got a pass, I think. She's the exception.
Literally.
I think.
Yeah. And then also some Czech success. So, we're still seeing Muchova in and around there. Buskova is doing well. Vondrousova's up there. We also have Petra Kvitova, who's in the mix. Obviously got the title in Miami earlier this year. So
and the first three names all reached the quarterfinals in this Cincy tournament, which was really impressive as well. So
so a lot of good things both on the ATP and WTA side, and that leads us into maybe our climber or story of the week.
Yeah, story of the week. So who you got for story of the week on the men's side?
Yeah, for me, it's a new name in Max Purcell. So he's an Aussie player. He's about 25, and up until 2023, a lot of us would have been like, who?
Yeah.
But he's put together a number of decent runs, and obviously 2 good back-to-back runs in the last 2 Masters tournament. He made the second round in Toronto, and then the quarters here in Cincinnati, losing out to Alcaraz.
Beating some big names as well on the way.
Yes, getting a top 10 win against Runa, taking out Wawrinka, I think, and maybe a couple others on the way. But he moves up 23 spots to be inside the top 50 for the first time. Big effort from him. I think he has a really interesting game style. He is an all-round player, but he stuck to that 7 volley strategy against Alcaraz.
Yeah. He did all the way. Yeah. Well, yeah, just aggressive serving and volleying right out of the 80s. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. And well, from the very first point, I think he had a flat-out forehand winner on the very first point in the match. That first set, he played absolutely phenomenal, just going for every single shot. I think it shows the way to beat Alcaraz is really to push him on the back foot, get him out of position, and really play like Alcaraz against Alcaraz. Because listen, Alcaraz from if he's in control, then he can play almost any shot in the book. But if you put him way out of position, then it's much harder to play the game that he does. He loves being able to dictate. So Max Purcell just coming with this crazy serve and volley game was really, I think it put off Alcaraz, at least for a set, if not for the rest of the match as well.
Yeah. It was fun to watch. He brings a different energy and style. So that's why I wanted to pick him this week.
Yeah. No, that's a good one for sure. And then match the week so every week we'll kind of go through like different segments, like story of the week, match the week, player of the week. We might add a few more in there later as well, but those are some of the section we'll kind of go through those every single week. So who do you have? What do you have for match of the week for this?
It picks itself. I mean, men's final.
Yeah, same here. And I think we already said pretty much everything we can say. Or I mean, there's a lot more to say, to be honest, but we said a lot earlier as well. And then who you got for player of the week? For we can do one for men's and one for women's as well.
Tough. Coco, my player of the week. Big breakthrough. Has to be, I think. It's tough, obviously. Djokovic walks away with the title, so I think taking that away from him right now, hard to do. Impressive week from his end. Alcaraz, if I could put him on the same scale, I would. If they could share the award.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let me look at the men's side real quick. But I'm picking Coco again I'm picking Coco as well for women's side, and then. For men's side, I'll just give it to Hubie because I just feel bad for the guy. He had match point up on Carlos. I just feel like he deserves a mention after nearly beating Alcaraz 2 weeks in a row. So I'll give it to Coco and I'll give it to Hurkacz. Now we're going to do a section of the podcast where we're going to be doing power rankings. What's the difference between the ATP rankings and the power rankings that we're going to do? It's basically who we think is playing the best at the current moment. So mostly it's probably going to be a lot of the players that are winning tournaments last week, a couple weeks ago, or getting to the semis, getting to the finals. But in general, it's kind of the players who we think are playing the best level at this moment in time. And just kind of the players who we think have the best chance of performing well at the US Open, for example, performing well in the next couple of weeks. The players who are in form at the moment and who we're excited about at the moment. So, we got our top 10 list. Do you want to get into it? So, all right. So let's do ATP first.
Okay.
So we both got Alcaraz for the ATP side, which is I think that's a bit of a hot take, to be honest, from both of our ends, because I think some people saw the final and now they're picking Novak. So why'd you go Carlos? And then I'll kind of give my reason too.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, some things were in Djokovic's favor this past week that were out of Alcaraz's control. Djokovic coming in with a nice long break and not having to do all these tournaments, travel, late night matches, etc. And also did have a slightly easier draw and kind of run into the final. So although it was very impressive, it will be best of 5 sets. Who knows who could know what would have happened last night if that had been best of 5. So for me, Alcaraz retains the number 1 spot, especially leading into a tournament where he's defending the title.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thing is that they're so close, I think, that just the fact that one player wins one match doesn't push the pendulum towards one side. Yeah. And I think that if, for example, Alcaraz this year, he's 53-6 on the season. Djokovic is somewhere in the ballpark of like 36-5. So Alcaraz has won way more matches. He's won more tournaments as well. So I think it's so close, but I think just the fact that they both had match points in this match. I think Alcaraz has had the better he has the better win percentage for the season so far, and I still feel like if Djokovic beats Carlos again, and if Djokovic wins the U.S. Open, then I have Novak. But for the time being, I got Carlos.
Yeah.
All right, and then we got Novak for number 2. I think we'd be crucified if we didn't have those as the top 2. Then we got I got Sinner for number 3. Who do you have? Who do you have over
here?
Sinner. Also Sinner. Nice.
I think him getting the breakthrough in Toronto was huge. Yeah. Played some really good tennis there. It's starting to come together for him. I still think him and his other the other players around that spot are just a cut below Alcaraz and Djokovic in terms of level. So, but he played such a good match against Alcaraz last year at the US Open, and he is starting to make progress. So for me, he's leading that list behind the top 2.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think his win percentage for the season is like 79%. He won Toronto. I mean, he lost in the first round of Cincinnati, but he was tired, and I think that was a big part of it. So, I think that Jannik is a pretty good number 3, and Daniil Medvedev is my number 4, and he was number 3. He was top 3 clearly for a big part of the season, but he lost pretty early in both Canada and Cincinnati, so I had him dropping just behind Jannik, who just won his first Masters. So you have Hurkacz for number 4. I like that pick. Lead me through that.
I think Medvedev has got a bit of a tale of 2 seasons in a way. Didn't start the year like super strong, then had a really great kind of middle of the year period, picking up a couple hard court titles, obviously winning a first clay court title, then didn't do well at the French Open, did a little better in at Wimbledon, but to kind of see like again 2 kind of uncharacteristic losses in the last 2 Masters. Obviously Zverev, he was winning that head-to-head, I think 3-0 or 4-0. He'd really had Zverev's number, and somebody gave Zverev some good tips on how to beat him, which apparently was Alcaraz. But I don't know. I feel like Medvedev has lost a little bit of steam. So I just put Hurkacz just the 1 spot ahead of him, just because I think Hurkacz has sort of come out of nowhere. He's not out of nowhere, but he's starting to play a better season. His hard court game, as you say, his grass court game as well is strong, and it's just again like little pieces here and there. He was close against Alcaraz. He has a big game. I think he can be pretty dangerous and somebody that is a bit of a fly on the wall in terms of like media isn't as followed as a Medvedev, and so can kind of cruise through some rounds unnoticed with a little less pressure. So that's why I'm putting him just 1 step ahead of Medvedev.
Yeah. I mean, he had 2 close tie breaks against Novak at Wimbledon, obviously, as well. I think that he did have a tough season for a long time, so that could put points off. But just the fact that he did well against Carlos both ways, I have him in my top 10 as well. And we'll get to that too. But okay, let's speed this up a little bit. I got Tommy Paul for number 5, and you have Daniil in there as well. And I think you kind of gave your explanation. He has to be in the top 5, but it makes sense that he's kind of dropped down a little bit due to recent results. I got Tommy Paul because, listen, I've been high on Paul for a while. He was 7th. He was 7th in the race to Turin going into the clay season earlier this year. He made it to the final of Acapulco, made the semis of Australia, made it to semis of Canada last week. Tommy Paul's been playing a high level. He got really close against Alcaraz this week, beat Carlos last week. So I feel like Tommy Paul's deserved it's deserved to say that on hard courts where we are at in the moment, he deserves to be pretty high at the power rankings, because if you see Tommy Paul's name in the draw, it doesn't matter whether he's 5th in the world, 10th in the world, 15th, 20th. I don't know exactly what he is, I guess around 15th. It doesn't matter. I think a lot of players are looking at his name with as something to fear at the moment because of how well he's done against Carlos and just how well he's done in the last few weeks and throughout this year. Like I said, Australian Open semis. So that's kind of why I had him there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a fair analysis. And yeah, he's certainly a name you wouldn't want to see in your half of the draw at the US Open, that's for sure.
Yeah, and just like I feel like an underrated athlete as well, which I think is worth pointing out, because I think
and his composure is great. He's very calm. Yeah, I think I slotted him in at 8. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely top 10 in kind of performance on hard court this year in my mind, and deserves to be.
No doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shout out Paul, because I think he'll do well. And then okay, I got Rublev. You have Zverev. I got Zverev for 7, but yeah. So Zverev, I think he won a title a couple weeks ago, and he beat Medvedev this week. Got to the quarters. I think got close against Novak, so he deserves to be high up in that top 10. And then I got Rublev in there as well, who I think Rublev is I don't know. He got to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. He won a title against Ruud a few weeks ago. Kind of went down a little bit in Canada Cincinnati, but nothing too crazy from my eyes. I still think he deserves a spot pretty high up. And I just don't love how Tsitsipas or Casper are doing, for example, at the moment, or Holger. So I felt like he still deserves a spot up there for how well he's done all season.
Yeah, he fell out of my power rankings a little bit. I just felt like he was losing a bit of energy, if I'm honest. Rublev plays with such intensity and such like emotion, and just felt like that composure and that kind of ability to problem solve was lacking a little bit the last few weeks. And for some reason, I just kind of have a funny feeling that he could get a tough draw at the US Open, and I don't know, for some reason I'm not feeling hot on him at the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
Although he did do well in the Australian Open, I don't know. I
think the more we disagree on the power rankings, the more fun it will be for fans to tune in throughout the week. So that's good. I mean, next week I'll go with I'll put Nori at number 1 and see what happens.
Yeah, but it looks like Runa's falling out of your top 10.
Yeah, I was gonna put Runa in there, but I just don't really like how he's played a couple weeks. I have questions about his stamina going late in tournaments, even when he has done well in tournaments. So I don't know. He's fallen out. And I put Demon at number 10 just because I really like Demon. But yeah, for the rest of my rankings, I got Ruud at number 8, who just hasn't done that well recently, just in recent tournaments. Then I got Hurkacz. I think we said what we needed to about Hurkacz. He's been playing a good level recently. Very amazing on serve, just unbelievable on serve. And then Demon at number 10. And then you have Runa at 7. Do you before we get into the women's rankings, do you just real quickly want to talk about Holger and him being?
Yeah, I mean, 7? I think the last few weeks he has had a little bit of a back niggle injury going on, so he has been taking it easy. Runa does seem like the type of guy who can kind of turn it on a little bit on the bigger stages. And based on the season, I would favor him over Ruud, so I had to slip one of them in there, and it was Runa for me. Dimonor creeps into my top 10 as well at number 9. Again, agree with you. He's been having a good season, made a couple hard court finals, and he's moving really well. He causes anybody problems. And I still have Fritzy in the top 10. He takes the 10th spot. Obviously doing well, picking up a title in Atlanta. So I don't know. I think he is due a good run at a slam. Maybe he's putting too much pressure on himself, but he has the game to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that too. I got to do a press conference with Fritz over in Atlanta, by the way. I got to go to that ATL Open in person, which was fun. Yeah. There's a vlog on the channel if you want to check that out. That was crazy.
I have. It's good.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Appreciate that too. But yeah, so and then you have Paul at 8 and Demon, then Fritz. Yeah, I like that too. And I want to put Taylor in, but I want him to prove something to me at the Open. Okay, so then we can go through the women's draw as well. Here we both have Iga at number 1, and we agree on the top 3. We agree on the top 4. Do we agree on everything?
I think we agree on the top 5, actually. Yeah.
Okay, we got the same top 5. That's almost miraculous. I don't think I even looked at yours, to be honest.
I honestly think this group semi picks itself, obviously, with the traditional kind of big 3 in Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Rybakina being the talk of the season so far. Splitting slams between them, and just in general going deep in slams and tournaments, picking up titles. It's been a really competitive year between the 3 of them. And then I think, Gauff and Pegula have presented more of a recent threat. Obviously, Pegula is an extremely consistent player. That's why she's always up there. But to get that Masters 1000 title with this timing, and then we both put Gauff ahead of Pegula, probably because Pegula lost to Gauff the last, I think, 2 times they've played, and Gauff seems to be on a bit of an upward trajectory. Am I wrong?
I think Pegula took out Gauff in Canada 7 times in the 3rd. Right.
Yeah. Feels like they've traded, because didn't Gauff beat her in DC and then beat her also on the grass. So I think they have a good head-to-head, but Gauff seems to really be on the ascendancy and found a new gear to her game. So that's why I put her a little bit higher. But yeah, I mean, I think the top 5 for the women's game sort of picks itself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so high on Coco at the moment, to be honest. I almost want to put her higher than 3. I was like, I just think it's kind of a big name going into the Open. It's like, but it wasn't to be. But still, number 3 is very high for Coco, and then Pegula and Rybakina. Like you said, I think the list kind of picks for itself. I think I like Iga at number 1 still, because she did win RG, and she still has had a hell of a season. I mean, she hasn't won nearly as many titles as she did last year, but I think that she's definitely a worthy name to pick. I don't think many people are going to question Iga at the top spot, either just reaching the semifinals of Cincinnati as well, and especially because Sabalenka and Rybakina haven't really won a title for a couple of months, I think. Am I wrong in that? I don't think they've won
a title since the clay court season, so that's the last time they've traded, and I think, Sabalenka is tricky because she obviously had that big breakthrough at the beginning of the year, winning the Aussie Open, but since then has made semifinals and finals and quarterfinals and lost. So we thought she kind of turned that corner. So obviously she is still up there in terms of fighting for that number 1 spot, and deserves to be there because she's been right there at the end of tournaments. It's just a matter of now whether she can consistently start making something happen from those deeper runs, which she hasn't quite proved yet, which is why I think putting Swiatek above her is the smart move.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and she's lost in the semifinals of Wimbledon to Ons Jabeur, and she lost in the semifinals to Muchova in the semis of RG. Both very close to winning, and if she beat Jabeur, she would have been number 1 in the world, but she might have a chance in New York, which will be interesting as well. And then what else we have? We have 6 through 10 might be a little bit more interesting. We got the same number 6 too, Muchova. Okay.
Sweet. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think Muchova's been a steady name recently. She obviously made the finals in RG, finals here in Cincy, has had good runs elsewhere. The biggest question mark for her is always health and fitness. But, she certainly has the game to really trouble anybody inside that top 10 list. So I think she deserves to be just a little bit below that top 5 who have been up there all season, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if she keeps the results consistent, then I think that she could even keep climbing up. But number 6 is a deserved spot for her at the moment. And then I've got Samsonova, Jabeur, Alexandrova, Vondrousova, and you got Vondrousova at number 7, still a high off of that Wimbledon title.
I think she's got a tricky lefty game, and that slice and variation that she brings, I think people are still figuring that out, kind of like I'm not comparing her to Raducanu by any means, but sort of like that player on the tour that maybe you don't know so well, that's kind of coming in and just you haven't watched enough tape or played her enough times yet to really figure out her game. So I think she's riding that high and can still cause problems with her variation on the hard court. And we both agree on Jabeur. I have Samsonova on 9. You have her on 7. Why is Samsonova higher up for you?
Yeah, I got Samsonova over Jabeur. Well, Ons really didn't have a great season up until Wimbledon. I feel like Wimbledon was really kind of a lake in kind of a desert of a season, like just meaning that she really hasn't had that kind of consistency. And I think that if we're going by power rankings, which is we're super confident in them performing at the moment, I just don't think Jabeur is that high, despite me being very high on Jabeur, and I think she can get to that level, but I'll put her higher when she does that. But at the moment, I think Samsonova has been very consistent since second half of last year and has played a very tough game and been a very dangerous player to a lot of top players as well. So that's kind of why I have it. If Ons performs well in the future, as I expect her to do, then I'll put her higher. But so far, she's kind of off that Wimbledon final high for this season.
Yeah. And then our differences come in Alexandrova and my pick with the smiley face, Danielle Collins.
Yeah, Danielle Collins played great Australian Open final last year, and I actually thought she played great at US Open. So I kind of put her name, I locked it into my brain, like she could do something at next year's US Open, at this year's US Open. So
she's had a couple good runs, qualified well in Canada, and then didn't do so much here in this match against Iga in Cincinnati. But when she's on, she's kind of like a Camilla Giorgi type of character, and she's extremely tough to deal with. I think I always favor homegrown talent a little bit at the US Open because the crowd is crazy. And obviously she has been top 10 and she has made a major final before. She actually has a coach on board now. She didn't have a coach for the longest time. She seems to be healthier. She's obviously had a lot of injury issues, but I'm biased towards Colin for some reason. I just love her game. And when she brings it, she's a tough match for a lot of players. So I'm sneaking her in my 10th spot.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, to be honest. I mean, I liked what you said about Giorgi type Ostapenko, Camila Giorgi, where they kind of go for their shots, and when they're playing well, they're really scary, and big hitters are doing really well at the moment with with Rybakina and Sabalenka, in particular at the top of the ranking. So Danielle Collins could sneak in there and have a few good runs even before you know it. So yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so do you want to talk about kind of stuff coming up? We have US Open right around the corner, which is exciting. We got qualifying going on next week. We also got Cleveland. We have Winston-Salem. In Winston-Salem, we have players like Borna Coric playing. We have Batista Agut playing. Sebastian, what are your thoughts, coming into the US Open and everything coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think given how packed the schedule has been over the last 4 weeks, so many tournaments back to back, I think the players who are playing this week are trying to play themselves into a little bit of form because they haven't had desirable results or gotten enough matches under their belt as they would have liked in the run-up to the US Open. So I think that's the type of profile that we're seeing play this week. Anybody who had a decent run or who really kind of backs themselves to come into the US Open with good form is taking this week off, having a rest. It's been a long season, and the US Open is brutal on those hard courts. It's going to be humid and hot 2 weeks. So a lot of players will be saving their energy, just trying to recoup from what's been happening on the tour. But I think some kind of interesting things to keep an eye out for this week besides the tennis going on. The draw for the US Open will be announced on Thursday. It's not going to be a televised draw. It will be announced traditionally via their website. So I think that will get us all excited for what's to come next week. And then a couple interesting wildcards awarded. Obviously, we have Venus Williams getting her wildcard and is now going to be competing in her 24th US Open, which is
absurd.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine like walking onto a court and being like, yeah, I'm going to play here 24 times. It's just nuts. And I don't think we'll see that for a long time, to be honest. So kudos to her.
30th year on tour, which is just unbelievable, and that's just a crazy thing to do. Especially it's not just she's been like 50th in the world for a lot. No, she's one of the all-time greats, and she's still around.
still
So
around
shout out.
and,
Yeah.
you know, still able to get a couple wins. And even despite some health issues and things going on, her spirit is just awesome and the fans adore her. So great that she has the opportunity to come back for a 24th time. I think it's also exciting to welcome back Caroline Wozniacki, Moms on Tour edition. We have more and more moms coming back and competing, which I think is just fantastic for the women's game and women's sport in general. You know, she is a former world number one and a former Grand Slam winner. And she's somebody that's also really liked by the fans. She's a very personable player and is well liked not just by fans, but also by other players. So it's great to see her getting a chance to come back. And, you know, I think she probably doesn't have as many matches under her belt as maybe she would like. So I'm not quite confident. I think it will just depend on the draw in terms of what she can do. And then the other one that I thought was interesting is John Isner getting a wild card into the US.
Big John.
I feel like he's been a name that has just like been around like for as long as I can remember. And like obviously he, you know, had a couple moments here and there at slams where you think, oh, like he's kind of getting closer, but he's just that name that's always in the drawer. And so to think that he even dropped out of the rankings to have a spot in the first place, you're like, what's happening? I guess he's getting old.
I have the exact stat for you. September 2009 until I think it was like May or June this year, he was in the top 50 the whole time. He was in the top 50. So Big John was always there and always around. And I mean, he's Atlanta Open, where I'm just like right nearby. He was winning the tournament every single year. So he's been around at least doing winning titles. So even if it's Atlanta or Newport, but
and he hasn't missed a US Open main draw since 2007, which again, like that level of consistency for him to be top 50, consistently turning up. Like I know he's the serve bot, but the guy deserves some credit for that longevity of a career. So
and that's a great stat too. Yeah, I mean, and then Winston-Salem and Cleveland should be interesting as well. I think I saw that Venus actually pulled out of Cleveland. She was originally going to play, but she pulled out. But there's still some good names in there as well.
So our last section in the podcast is going to be tennis culture. So this is kind of an opportunity for us to discuss hot topics going on in tennis right now. So this could be, you know, conversations around things like night matches or when tournaments should be played, or it could also be things like fashion and culture as it relates to the broader sport of tennis and kind of how it's growing and trends that we're seeing with it. So this week, we really wanted to talk about the lack of time between Canada and Cincinnati having these back-to-back Masters tournaments. Maybe what that might look like in the future when Masters tournaments are expanded to a 10-day or 2-week format. It just feels like the schedule between the French Open and now is absurd. And it's taken a toll on players' body. And then one can't help but question if that will affect the quality of the tennis at the majors, which we all know are kind of the most important events for fans.
Yeah, I mean, Yannick Sinner and Alex de Minaur made the final in Canada, and then they both lost in the opening round of Cincinnati, which was really kind of absurd and just strange. And it was like I don't know, a lot of the players that did well in Cincinnati just lost and did well in Canada, I should say, lost early in Cincinnati. So that was I don't know, there's something to say about it. I don't know though what they could change about the schedule. Obviously they could put Cincinnati a week, just change it to another week in the schedule or something like that. But aside from that, I'm not sure exactly what they could do to really make it much better. I mean, I've seen a few different suggestions, but I'm not really sure to what they can change about that. It's not ideal though.
Yeah, it's a very congested schedule. You know, so just said, like, once you finish the French, there's 2-3 weeks until Wimbledon. There's little packed tournaments in there. Then all of a sudden there's Newport, Atlanta, you know, and then we're into DC, and all of a sudden 2 Masters back to back, obviously with the requirements of kind of what you have to film, play. Yeah, it just seems crazy. If you make a final in Canada on Sunday night, you have to fly, recoup, travel. You got a rest day Monday, maybe Tuesday if you're lucky, but you're probably playing Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And that's a tough turnaround. You know, it slams players can finish at 2, 3 a.m. and at least they know they're going to have the next day off to kind of have those late night matches in the schedule happening and then needing to turn up and play again the next day. It just seems brutal and cruel in a way. And I think the tour needs to do a better job on both sides of players' health, protecting them, thinking about the longevity of the tour and considering other options. You know, if you have to put a Masters after the US Open, like, consider it if that means you have less retirements and you have better performances in those Masters. I think it's all about giving players the best opportunity to bring their best performance. And to me, the way the schedule is right now, it's just not allowing for that, which I think is a big shame.
Yeah, totally. I can say better. Yeah, it's just about them figuring out exactly how to tweak that a little bit. But I think that that could be a big thing to change, because ideally with any of these kind of things that we talk about with whether it be scheduling issues or whether it be issues of just anything at all, whether it be kind of Hawkeye or whether it should be on-court technology or anything like that, umpiring issues, whatever it is, kind of the main goal should be, how do we create the best possible tennis match experience for the crowd, experience for the players, and or in the best tournament overall. And the way to do that is to get the players playing at their 100%. That would be the best for the players. That would be the best for the crowd. And when you have a lot of very cramped up time and scheduling, that really just stops that from being a viable possibility. So that's a big thing that the tours, I think, need to look at just overall. And if we could schedule the season in a much better way. I've heard people talking about the clay after Wimbledon and ahead of the US Open as well. It's like there's things that we could maybe shift around and then play a tournament a week later or before and different things like that. And that's just something that I think the tours need to look into and figure out, because I don't think that that's something that is just so easy to say, but it's a complex issue. But I think the tour should look into it.
I agree. And it feels like the energy hasn't necessarily been there. And I think the question that also accompanies that is the late night tennis format, especially in the US, like hard court swing. Because I thought it was an interesting debate, again, that came up during Wimbledon with curfews and needing the matches to finish by 11 p.m. And, you know, some players being like, oh, I just want to get it over with. But I think a lot of them are now, you know, on the Players' Council, making more and more requests to reduce the number of late night matches that they have to play in, where they then, you know, it is such a short tournament, well, they'll have to turn up and play again the next day. And I think that, to me, honestly, from a health perspective, is a very reasonable request. And also not just from the players, but all the people who are working at the event, you know, from the commentators to the spectators to the ball kids to the umpires and everybody who's officiating and making things happen. That's a late finish for them. No sleep, turning up the next day. I mean, is that really putting on the best show possible? And I just continue to question at times, like, you know, in the local zone that tournament is taking place in, who is staying up until 3 a.m. consistently to watch these matches. I know I struggle during the US Open. It feels like a different tradition, which maybe I can understand, but I also don't understand how you're putting 5 or 6 matches on your main court, knowing that one of them is going to go to 5 sets and ruin your whole schedule. Just use the other courts. Let matches on other courts. You know, to me, it just seems ridiculous to kind of have that expectation. People have jobs and work and things to do the next day. All of us just get to hang around and watch tennis. So I think from a spectator and from a fan perspective and the player perspective, there's a lot of questions that I would like more transparent answers to from the tour side, as to like really what the numbers are that justify them continuing to have this type of scheduling strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's something to be said about, I've seen arguments about going against best of 5 sets, for example. That kind of argument I would never support, because I think that best of 5 is absolutely needed in tennis and to bring out the best of what the sport has to offer. And I think that best of 3 doesn't show what the best of the sport has to offer. So if you want to get rid of what the best of tennis has, then I think you can get rid of best of 5. But if you want to keep it, then that's what best of 5 does. And then, but in terms of late scheduling, yeah, it's ridiculous for Acapulco to start at 3 a.m. and start a matchup at 3 a.m. And then a player is serving when usually somebody's sleeping in the middle of the night. And it's just like, what is even going on? And it's like, and then people start questioning tennis, and it's like, it's not a good spectacle. It's not a good spectacle. And it's like, and you see some media outlets for tennis or something hyping like, wow, match finishes at 4 a.m. But then you see other people being like, that's not a healthy way for players to deal with scheduling. And that's not healthy. So, and I'm more on the latter, which is just, I don't think it's healthy for the players. I don't think it's good for the fans. And I think for the most part, that's a big thing that tennis scheduling needs a big revamp in general, I think.
Really hope they adopt a little bit more of a kind of transparent process here in terms of how the decisions are made, because a lot of fans are asking these questions, and just, rightly so. And I think it's a topic that needs to be revisited and also then be consistent across the WTA and ATP.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys tuning in for the first episode of Tennis 360. I hope to do a lot more of these as well. I've been Anthony Hirsch.
I'm Eliza Wastcoat.
And I appreciate you guys watching. Tune in for the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Quality Shot Tennis. If you haven't already, like the video as well, if you enjoyed it as well. And we'll see you out more stuff. And see you guys at the next podcast.
See you next week.